coming in here. Feels good to see this community. Hi, Ellie. Can everybody hear us okay? Yeah, I've got nods. I've got smiles. Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
You know what? It looks like if the Brady Bunch were Mormon.
and much bigger.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're here. Michael Levine. What's up, man? Cool. So
What's
thanks
up? Sorry.
everybody. Thanks everybody for getting on this call with us. This is a sound check to make sure that you can hear us okay. We got a thumbs up. Zoom housekeeping. I'm sure you all know at this point that you've got a speaker view and a gallery view. It's really fun in the gallery view to see everybody's faces and scroll through the screens up in your upper right hand corner. You can toggle between those two. Down on the bottom, you've got your chat box. You can click on that and open up the chat window and maybe say hi and where you're calling in from. It's always kind of fun to see where everybody is, so feel free to use that chat window. A little later in the call, we'll do some Q&A and we'll pull those questions out of the chat window. So as the call goes on, if you want to pop some questions in there, that'll be a good place to do it. I see a lot of friendly faces and also a lot of new faces. So I'm gonna introduce myself real quick and Art of Freelance, and then excited to introduce our two guests today. My name is Matthew Young. I'm a photographer and a director. I'm based here in Los Angeles. I'm also the founder of Art of Freelance, which is an online workshop. We're just wrapping up our 10th 10-week workshop right now. So basically twice a year for 10 weeks, we do this series of goal setting exercises, and then we check in weekly with this small group of other creative freelancers, and we kind of support each other while we work on a portfolio project or a personal project. And it's amazing how much more we're able to accomplish when we have that kind of community and accountability that we can give to each other. So I want to invite everyone to come to our showcases where we're going to see the results of the last 10 weeks of work from this current cohort. They're on June 12th and 13th. You'll get an email with an invite. It's our first time doing it digitally. So that'll be new and interesting and exciting. But the good news is you don't have to drive to Highland Park to our studio to see great work. So it'll be about 50 creatives spread over 2 nights, showcasing these projects that they've created. And it's always a really inspiring event. And yeah, we invite you to join us. We've also been trying to aggregate some information that's useful for freelancers about the federal loans and the unemployment and the safety protocols and more of the short-term questions that we've been kind of facing over the past 2 months. And you can find all that information on our blog, artoffreelance.com. Click on blog. There's articles about all of these things. And actually a quick public service announcement about the PPP loan. There's over $100 billion still there that is available for small businesses, freelancers to apply for. In the last week, we've heard from 5 friends that were originally denied, or their application didn't go through, or something happened that reapplied through alternative lenders like Quicken, QuickBooks, PayPal, Cabbage. And we've talked to 5 friends that have gotten these pretty substantial loans, which hopefully will be forgiven at the end of the 8-week period. So you need to do your research. You need to understand how it works and how the loan forgiveness works. But if it's something that you were curious about and originally you kind of got scared off because of a really messy rollout, or you were denied, or your bank wasn't taking those applications, I'm just personally encouraging you to look back into it and see if it's something that might be right for you, worth checking in on. There's information on the blog about the alternative lenders that are accepting applications from freelancers. So on to this call today. It's obviously been a scary couple of months for creative freelancers. I have personally felt a lot of anxiety about what the future of the industry will look like, and all these questions about, should I be pivoting my business, and when and how do I do a virtual video village, and taking OSHA courses and applying for PPP and EIDL loans and all these new acronyms that I never really wanted to learn and don't really want to remember in the future. But what I wanted to do today was to take a step back from that, to take a deep breath and sort of, I personally feel like I've been kind of sprinting for the past 2 months and kind of staring at my feet and just trying not to trip or stumble or fall or get sick, or, you know. So, and I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of slow down and take a look at the horizon and have a conversation today that's not about the new normal, and it's not about any of the short-term stuff, but instead I want to try to have a conversation about what hasn't changed, about some of the fundamentals about building a successful career in photography that were true before COVID, that are true now during COVID, and that we think might still be true in the future. And you know, we got hundreds of questions submitted when you registered for the call here, and you know, we all read through them, Art and Jen and I, and it's very clear, you know, the anxiety that's out there and how many questions there are about the short term. But we're asking everybody, we're acknowledging that first of all, that is there, and that we're in the same boat, and that we feel these same questions. And the truth is, we don't have those answers. And we're asking for this call to be a little bit different and to take a step back and to try to unpack some of those foundational fundamentals that we think will be true moving forward. So that's the premise of today. That's kind of the context. And to help us to that point, we're very lucky to be joined by two incredibly intelligent and experienced and thoughtful leaders in our industry, who I have the pleasure of introducing now. Jen Lamping is an art producer. She's a curator, and she was previously a photo rep. She's worked with literally the best photographers in the world on the biggest global campaigns for the world's biggest brands. She's currently a vice president and director of art production for RPA Advertising here in Los Angeles. And she's very generously agreed to join us today and to try to provide some of the insights from where she sits and what she's seeing on the agency side of the table. And we're also joined by, hi Jen. We're also joined by the one, the only Mr. Art Streiber. It's hard to write an intro for you, Art. I think it's fair to say, I'm just gonna say it, that you're a legend at this point. You know, you're an incredibly successful photographer. You've got client lists and accolades that are too long to list. I'm sure people on this call already know you. They love your work. If you don't, you should. You should definitely be following his Instagram, where he provides this great behind the scenes look into his process. And it's honestly, it's that bit about Art that's sort of one of the reasons why you've always stood out to me. Art is one of the few people that I've met in this industry that has really taken the time throughout his career to mentor young photographers. Some of my first assisting jobs were for Art. And Art was not only generous in how he trains his assistants with the lighting and the digital and the gear and all those technical pieces, but he took the time to sort of provide insight into thinking about our business and our organization, and to suggest pieces that we can put in place early that will help our careers on down the road. And it was really impactful for me. And I really appreciate that about you, Art, and that you continue to do that for a lot of photographers. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So like I said, we got hundreds of questions on the registration link, and a lot of them were sort of focused on the here and now, and we're not going to be able to touch on everything, and we don't have the answers. And I think you both wanted us to just have an opportunity to acknowledge that, you know, whatever we say here today is our thought today, and that we don't have the answers, and that it's impossible to know. And that we're not going to be able to touch on everything. We're not going to be able to provide all the answers. But my first question for each of you is about the other thing, about the sort of big picture horizon thing. So I'll just ask you, Jen, first. What is something that stands out to you as one of these fundamental truths for photographers, something that was true before and is true now, and that you think will be true in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that hasn't changed is just continuing to build upon your fundamentals and what the capabilities you can provide. I mean, certainly you need to kind of adjust that right now, because things are changing, and you know, your capabilities may be changing and growing, and your offerings could be growing as well. But I think that never changes the fact that you're kind of constantly, you know, growing and able to communicate what you're able to offer out to the world, so that people are aware of what you're able to do. That, I don't think that's changed, and I think it can only get better and grow during this time.
That's great. And the idea of communication, I think we want to spend a lot of time on that sort of in the second half of this call and really unpack more of your thoughts and what you're seeing and how people are communicating and how they're marketing. And it's something that we really want to spend some time on this call and that we're going to come back to.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Art, how about you? For you, what's something that's one of these fundamental truths for photographers, something that was true then, is true now, might be true in the future?
I think the fundamental truth for me is that we have to remember that we are all essentially small businesses, and that we have to treat our careers and our studios and our crews and our clients the way we would if we were running any small business. You know, and I like to use the bakery analogy. Just imagine if you owned and ran a small bakery in your neighborhood. For me, getting down to the essentials, the nuts and bolts of office organization, the fundamental structural pieces that it takes to do what we do, and servicing those is absolutely imperative. And basically, we've all heard the phrase art and commerce. And if you just keep kind of extrapolating from that idea, there's creativity and organization, there's aesthetics and logistics. And everybody has been kind of imposing this idea on us over the last 11 weeks that we're supposed to tap into our creativity and really kind of force creativity from this incredibly stressful situation. And if that's not coming to you naturally, then I would say tap into your organization and really kind of micro visit the way that your entire business is set up, and take the opportunity to fix, change, alter, enhance your business.
Yeah. And that was really one of the impetuses for wanting to have this conversation. And one of the reasons why I reached out to you specifically is that you know, I think walk this line between creativity and organization very well. And that's always been a sort of tenet of your work, and that you're someone that gets called when they need to figure out how to shoot 100 people in a room and the logistics are really challenging. And it seems like in this time, the value of organization isn't going anywhere. It's going to be even harder to organize some of the logistics around shoots moving forward. So I guess just to unpack this idea about organization a little bit more, you were kind enough to let me take you out to breakfast, like, God, it might've been a decade ago, and you drew a picture. There was 4 quadrants of like the way that you saw a photographer's business being broken out. And I was just wondering if you would speak to your 4 quadrant breakdown and share some of that insight for people. Oh, he's got it. All right.
Absolutely.
I found mine the other day. You drew it on a piece of paper, and I found it in like a pile of things that I was saving the other day.
Let's see how this plays.
All right.
There it is.
Organization.
What I told you then, and what I believe to be true now, is that our business is composed of only these 4 elements. I really believe there aren't 3, there aren't 5. There's just these 4. And those 4 are, you know, your shoots, your productions. There's your archive, your marketing, and your finances. And I think it's really, really important that once you've come to terms with that, once you've kind of owned that proposition, then you can start to organize and assign different entities or responsibilities to yourself, the calendar, the people that support you. But what I learned over the years was that each of those different areas has to be serviced all the time. You cannot let up. You absolutely have to obviously maintain your shoots and your aesthetic and your productions. You have to monitor your archive and maintain your archive. You have to maintain your marketing and adapt your marketing, and you got to watch the bottom line. You got to pay the bills, and you got to pay your vendors.
Yep. That kind of thinking really rang true for me, and was even revealed to be more true during this time. Sort of the efforts that I had put into my organization around finances really helped in applying for the PPP loans. The effort that I put into organizing my archive really helped when clients were reaching out and asking for licensable imagery during this time, and to have the model releases organized. And so I was reflecting on how grateful I was to have received that advice early on, and to have put some time and energy into those fundamental, foundational, concrete under your feet sort of things, because it sort of freed me up in this time to want to be, when I wanted to be creative, or when I was feeling that creativity, to have something to build on top of that. So I appreciate you sharing that with everybody. Jen, do you notice a difference from your side in working with a photographer who's very well organized, who sort of has all those pieces put together, versus photographers that aren't? Is that something that kind of comes through on the job side, on the creative side, on the marketing side, those other pieces, what you see?
Oh yeah, I was just thinking when Art was talking about that, like, you really can tell when someone's organized and when they have their, excuse my language, but their shit together. It makes your job easier. Things happen a lot quicker, more efficiently, and it makes you more want to work with them more, or include them in more projects, because you know that they've got their stuff together, and it makes it easier to then vouch for them for clients or with clients. So it makes a huge impact. And as a producer, we hopefully are somewhat organized, and we think that way too. So if a photographer can also be like-minded in that sense, it's really, really helpful.
Yeah. And I think the producer piece is a valuable thing to call out. Like, there are people that you can add to your team and work with, hire a producer that can help with a lot of those pieces, but it still really helps to sort of understand the fundamentals of what you're trying to organize and all of that. It's like understanding lighting before you ask a great lighting assistant to set something up for you. It just really helps to have that language to go in there. Art, I'm curious, or actually for both of you, like, I feel like photographers can be a little afraid of organization, afraid of the name, afraid of the concept, afraid of the idea, like it would get in the way of their creativity. Like, we are creative people, not organized people. I didn't get into photography to have spreadsheets or databases or manage my finances. And I guess I'm just wondering if you think that's true, if you think that there is this right brain, left brain split, or how to think about that.
There is absolutely a left brain, right brain split. And I'm not here to say that you have to be 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30. What I'm advocating is that you have to recognize that this is about art and commerce, and that somewhere along the line, whether it's you or a studio manager or an agent or a partner or spouse or blood relation or best friend, is going to have to pick up the pieces of the commerce side. And the analogy I like to give is to Van Gogh's self-portrait after he had cut off his ear. And what I like to say is that if you're crazy enough to cut off your own ear, you should probably get a studio manager. If you are that deep into your artistry, that's phenomenal. Congratulations. I wish I could go there. But keep in mind that the bills have to be paid and the plants have to be watered, and you've got to be able to find your gear the next day. So striking that balance is huge, absolutely critically huge, because I want to use an analogy from somebody who's on the call, very good friend of mine, Saman Asefi, who came up with the earthquake analogy. This is an earthquake, and the question on the table is, can all of our buildings withstand the earthquake? And how strong was your foundation? How strong was your rebar? You know, can you find, you know, now that everything's on the floor, how easily can you find it and put it back up on the shelf? It's brilliant. That's exactly right. That's what we're experiencing.
Yeah, and one of our earliest conversations, that's where this idea of the foundation, what are these foundational elements? Like if your house got shook, and I think for some, it's like the whole thing is rubble, but you're scraping it away and you're looking at the foundation. For some, you know, a lot got knocked off and you're trying to figure out what to rebuild, but this is an opportunity to look at your foundation, to decide if that was the right foundation, decide if you need to build on that foundation to reinforce that foundation as you start to sort of rebuild within that.
Absolutely. And I just want to add, this is about micro goals right now. This is about, you know, looking around your space, your office, your studio, and just asking yourself the rhetorical question, wouldn't it be great if, you know, wouldn't it be great if all of my image reference were in one place, and then going and figuring out, you know, how you want to organize it. It's really about just these micro goals that are going to honestly help build you, and support your career. I don't know how many people have watched the Michael Jordan documentary, but I was really struck by, I think it was the end of the 1989-90 season, and they had lost to the Pistons again. And the following week, they were all supposed to go on vacation, and Michael dragged everybody back into the gym. And that was just startling to me. And it made complete and total sense, because he realized he needed to weight train. If he was going to beat the Pistons next year, he and his team had to weight train, because the Pistons were bullies and they were literally physically beating the shit out of the Bulls. And they went to the gym and they swept the Pistons in 4 at the end of the 91 season, and went on to beat the Lakers and win the championship.
So be more like Michael Jordan is the
yeah. That's my takeaway.
Well, and I think it's got to feel good to have these goals, these little goals that you can control, right? And you can feel somewhat accomplished or, you know, satisfied, because it's so hard to feel worthy right now, or that you're doing anything worthwhile or accomplishing anything. But I feel like that those are great recommendations by Art, of like, you know, identify your pillars and identify little tasks that you can kind of just check off your list and get over with, so that you don't have to deal with it when it comes back to, you know, working regularly, and you'll have it taken care of. I mean, I know personally that's kind of like how I'm trying to operate too, just to kind of keep going and try to, like, you know, find small wins throughout the day that make you just kind of feel better about everything.
Yep. The only other, the layer that I would offer on top of that also is like these micro goals in service of your big vision and your macro goals. And it's really hard right now, because there is so much sort of haze in the air to get clarity on those long-term goals. But for me right now, like 1 year, 2 year goals are really hard, but like my 5-year goals, my 10-year goals haven't changed that much because of coronavirus. So it's like these micro goals in service of these macro, big picture, long-term visions have been helpful for me along this time.
Right.
So Jen, there was a question that came in when people were registering that was just sort of like, if you could recommend a photographer to be focusing on like one thing, like narrowing down their focus right now, because I do feel like we're getting pulled in a lot of directions and a lot of should be doings. Like, what do you see as a focus point for people?
I mean, I think it's a lot of what Art just talked about, is kind of like cleaning house and building a strong foundation, you know, expanding capabilities. You know, if there's an area that you feel like you just never have gotten time to work on before, and you've never been able to dedicate to it, now is the time to kind of do that. You know, I think we're all trying to figure out what it's going to look like, and when it's going to roll out and how it's going to roll out. And I don't think any of us, I think that's daunting when we try to figure that out, because none of us can figure it out on our own. So I think it's just trying to figure out the things that are doable, that will enable you to be better when we come out of this, and come out of it with more skill set, or, you know, more organization, or more offerings. So I think just focusing on the things that you can control, and that you can make better.
Yeah, you've said that a couple of times now, this adding a layer of offerings, learning new things, adding something on top of that. And I think that's really interesting, because there's been this sort of like tension between like, am I supposed to pivot and all of a sudden become a product photographer when I was a portrait photographer? Or people have these questions about sort of diversificationing and pivoting. And I really like what you're offering of adding a layer, adding a new skill, adding a new offering, adding something else on top of what already exists in your foundation, pouring a little bit more concrete over there.
And I wouldn't force it to an area that doesn't seem right, or doesn't feel comfortable, or isn't something that you would have normally wanted to do had this not all happened. I think it's just, you know, this is a time to get really clear with what we want and what's important to us. And, you know, I think before there was always, at least from our end, like, you just always assume a photographer could do certain things. But now it's like, you know, it's a little harder to just even do those basic things. So it's kind of also kind of explaining and showing how that's doable, you know, not only from like a personal project level, but in the, you know, in a real job circumstances where there are a lot of people to answer to and a lot of hoops to run through. You know, that kind of translates a bit more to what we're dealing with. It's lovely to see all of the personal projects and the personal work that's coming out of this. And I think in the beginning, it was very comforting to see that sort of beautiful work, just because we all were so fearful and we didn't know what was going to happen next. And I think, you know, now we've moved on from that a little bit, and now it's kind of like, okay, let's get back to figuring out the real work of it and how we can kind of do this art in a commerce world, and what does that entail now. So seeing that sort of stuff from our point of view is really helpful.
So like the idea of how people can maybe start translating those personal projects into work that might be relevant to the clients that they're reaching out to.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's especially relevant when, I mean, I know there aren't a ton of jobs happening right now or commissions happening, but for those that are happening, like, how did you go about doing that? I think, you know, a lot of our clients are just not wanting to take a lot of risks right now, because they themselves are trying to figure out what they want to do, what the message is, you know, because it's constantly changing. If we were to create something, you know, today, when it goes out in the world in a month, is it going to be a totally different atmosphere? Or are they going to have to scrap everything? So I think they're all kind of holding back a lot, kind of wanting to see what others are doing, if there isn't an urgency to kind of create anything right now. So I think that's been really helpful to see those real life situations. And I know, like, Art, you've had a few of those come up, right, for more of the editorial world, and you've had to kind of think in different ways and create in different ways. And I think that's been really interesting to see.
Yeah, Jen's absolutely right. It's not necessarily switching from automotive to, you know, shooting babies and weddings. It's about, how am I going to tweak what I do in order to meet the unknown parameters that are coming our way. We got a query yesterday for another drone shoot and or a Zoom shoot. So I have to be prepared to explain to the client how drone shoots work and how they don't, and how Zoom shoots work and how they don't. Or an inquiry today about, you know, shooting in the backyard at my office. What does that involve? So it's really about not so much completely changing the genre that you're in, so much as it is being ready to just imagine what clients might be asking you to do. Yep. You know, are they going, if you're an automotive shooter, are they just going to send you the car and you've got to drive, you know, to Big Sur and figure out how to shoot it? It could be something like that, because Jen is hearing from clients, and the clients want to know, how could we get this? How are we going to get this done?
Right.
So Jen is going to call, hopefully, one of us and say, how are we going to get this done?
Yeah.
And you're going to have some answers.
Yeah, I mean, we've already been leaning on photographers for their expertise for years now, but it's kind of like leaning on in a whole different way, because it's not just, we know you guys can shoot, but it's like, tell us how you would do X, Y, and Z, because we don't know those answers anymore. And we have to then ensure that, the client feels secure about it, because they would hate for something to go wrong or for there to be bad press or something like that. So yeah, we rely heavily upon photographers to kind of figure out that puzzle even more so now than before.
So building on this idea of communicating how you accomplished a project and what your process was and how you solved the problems, your Instagram for a long time now has been this behind the scenes look at photo shoots, and people obviously find a ton of value in that. And I'm curious how you're thinking about communicating and continuing to communicate how you're approaching these projects and how you're trying to solve these problems, and what that looks like for you.
I'm certainly going to continue to use Instagram, and I am sending emails to selected clients of mine to explain to them that my digital tech, Eric Vlasic, and I have wrapped our heads around remote monitor viewing. And that's now, it's just another tool in the toolkit, just like the drone is just another tool in the toolkit. I'm not here to say that drones are the way of the future, Zoom shooting is the way of the future. It's just really expanding our toolkit. So when Jen calls, I can say, we could do that, we could do that, we could do that, we can do that. Ooh, I hadn't thought of that. Let's figure out how to do that. Yeah. It's being nimble. And as far as shooting remotely goes, literally 3 or 4 weeks ago, it was, how are we going to include the capture monitor on Zoom? And it was like, okay, that's easy. Wait, how are we going to have cameras in the studio? Oh, okay, we figured that out. And now, honestly, the single biggest hurdle is sound.
Yep.
No question, it's sound. And not just it's about client communication.
Yep.
Because right now you can mute everybody and I can talk to Jen, but Jen might not want to be the voice of God in the studio. She might want to privately communicate to me about what she needs and what she wants and what the talent needs and wants. Yep. So now we've got to mute everybody, and I'm wearing earbuds all day, or my producer is wearing earbuds all day, or Elaine Brown is wearing earbuds, or the first AD is wearing earbuds, and they can't come up and whisper in my ear because we have to stay 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
So it's really about sound right now.
Yeah, it's and it's fun to do the photo shoot with earbuds in, and then also speakers, and then also a mic at the remote video village, and all of the pieces has been. It's also, the Zoom remote shooting it's taxing, it's challenging, and the communication is different, and it's a new process to learn. And we've been experimenting with the same stuff, and yeah, it's been, you get done and you're exhausted after communicating in that way for a length of time, which is really interesting. So I guess this was a sort of a natural pivot to the idea of marketing and how photographers are communicating and how they're reaching out to you, Jen, and just like, is this form of reaching out with, here are some new things we're experimenting with, here are some problems that we're trying to solve, of asking what are the issues that you're facing, what kind of successful communications are you seeing in this sort of realm of photographers trying to wrap their heads around fixes to new problems? And is that any different than how good marketing was before?
Yeah, I mean, it's been helpful. We've definitely been receiving a lot of, here's X, Y, and Z, they're located here, they have this at their, they have this type of location, and they have these types of people around them. And that's been helpful, just to kind of see people kind of, very problem solving, and kind of getting a glimpse into their world that we didn't really need to know before. But, we've been getting a lot of that. So, initially I think it was very novel, and now it's starting to kind of wear out a little bit because everyone seems to be doing it. But, it's nice to kind of like, file it away and kind of remember like, oh, okay, I remember seeing this, or, but I think ultimately, if we're still going to think about the photographer, the type of work or the genre, and kind of go after the type of photographer we want, and then speak with them about what their capabilities are, what their thoughts are. And I think, what hasn't changed is just consistency, being front of mind. Obviously don't want to do too much, but like a monthly mailer, this is what I've been up to. This is what we've been shooting. This is what we've learned. These are things that we did for ourselves, but then we actually did some client work, and this is how we achieved that. Because a lot of times it's just kind of us receiving it, noting it, filing it away, and just kind of pulling it out when the time comes. And, the time has not come quite yet right now, because like I said, I think a lot of clients are still kind of laying low and figuring things out and waiting for things. It definitely feels like it's picking up a little bit. Like we know that this is kind of the new normal. So how do we live in this? And what does that messaging look like? And so I think they're still trying to figure it out, but they've still been very hesitant to go out and shoot anything new. It's been a lot of, utilizing existing artwork, repurposing things, licensing things. So yeah, I don't think anything should change in terms of the consistency with messaging and your, what marketing you were doing before. I think it's just kind of maybe being a little more explicit in what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what your offerings are. Whereas before we didn't necessarily need to know all of that.
I'm always curious about this, and I feel like it's a shock for photographers that haven't heard this before, but like how many emails would you say that you receive a day from photographers or reps or production companies reaching out, sort of offering different solutions for you?
It's a lot.
Yeah, but like more.
I'd say maybe 50 to 100 a day.
Yeah.
So it's hard to stand out in that, because it starts to all blend together. And then, you obviously don't know some of the people, so it might not register as much. But if, say, Art were to send something to me, I know him, I know his work, I would register a little bit more for me. Or it also depends on what you're working on. Who are your clients? Like if I'm working on automotive, I'm going to pay attention to those sorts of things, but I'm probably not going to pay attention to beauty or something like that as much, just because it's not as relevant to the clients I'm working for and the type of photographers or artists I'm looking to possibly work with in the near future. So I think it's also about timing and relevance as well.
So I feel like timing and relevance. Oh, sorry, go for it, Art.
No, I think it needs to be clarified. Jen said, monthly mailer. And I know at the end of the call, Jen is going to give all of us her home address. But the point is that we can't and afford, nor can we guarantee that if we mailed something to Jen, that the nice folks at RPA are forwarding all of her mail.
Okay.
There you go.
I meant email, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So now we're all in the same email boat, and Jen's getting 50 to 100 a day. We're all on the computer. Literally, if somebody 6 months ago had said, in 2020, we're going to be spending more time on the computer, everybody would have said, are you on crack? And here we all are. So it just occurred to me that, subject lines are the new splash page, because I've now got to get Jen's attention somehow. And that was not, by no means did I mean to advocate for illicit or explicit subject lines. I'm just saying, hard copy promos have to take a back seat.
What was interesting to me in this last couple of minutes is sort of distilling down what Jen said to timing and relevance still being the sort of keys to unlock that. If you get the thoughtful email that says what you do and has a great subject line that grabs the attention and clearly explains it, and it's relevant to what she's working on, and the timing is right, and she reads it, and this is right for a project, that's how. But isn't that how it was always? Wasn't that always how it was? Is that timing and relevance in your email and print promo communications was sort of the key? So is that another thing that potentially isn't that different?
Yeah, that was the case before. as well. I think now it's just we're not just looking at those communications anymore for like, what did you do? What did you create? Now it's also like, how did you create it? And what types of things are you creating that might be more relevant right now in the messaging? So, you know, and how did you pull it off? So I think that's more unique now than it was before, because before we didn't always need to know that or had those questions because it was just kind of a given.
Yeah, that's really great. That's like a wonderful layer to think about how you add that onto your, you know, the marketing you're already trying to do. There was something coming up for me when we were just talking a minute ago about these new solutions and offering new solutions to potential clients, which was making me think about your crew and your collaborators. And, you know, Art, you've always been a huge advocate for the way in which you build a team and work with people over a long period of time. And I was just wondering what you think about, you know, building a team and leadership and collaboration. And, you know, is that another one of these fundamentals? Is that something else that's changed or remained the same?
There's no question that the infrastructure that we've built up over the years includes crew, and it includes, you know, I remember specifically when Elaine and I had the conversation about having to have a deep bench, not just with assistants, but with producers, set designers, hair and makeup people, because the people that we were starting to work with or working with regularly were now in a lot of demand, and we couldn't always get them. So having a deep bench is going to be huge right now. Not only, well, first and foremost, because we are going to encounter, we have already encountered crew that don't want to work for safety issues, and because they don't want to jeopardize their unemployment. So
Hard-fought unemployment.
yeah, absolutely. So being able to assemble a crew right now is going to be a very, very, very ginger proposition. And, you know, Jen's point of that the clients are trying to figure out how to message, that just trickles down everywhere. It trickles down to her agency, it trickles down to us, and it, you know, trickles down to how we approach our crew and are sensitive to their caution and their needs. Speaking of great messaging, I was in the car this morning and there's a new Netflix billboard up that I just loved. So I took a picture of it and I printed it, and I'm gonna hold it up. And the word that you can't read that's in red is will.
Yeah.
You will work in this town again, which is the kind of the flip of the old joke, you will never work in this town again. And that gave me all kinds of great hope and optimism, you know? And I thought, oh my God, what a great message. It doesn't say, you know, we're ready and now we know how to shoot with drones. It was just like, you will work in this town again.
Jen, do you see a big difference between photographers who have clearly taken the time to sort of like cultivate a crew and take good care of their crews? Do you see a difference when you're working with photographers on set for someone that might just be, it's a bunch of day players that don't have a great cohesion, and somebody, you know, you've had a full-time studio manager and for assistant with Elaine on your shoots for as long as I've known you, and I'm sure that and I know that your crews, Eric Glassick's worked with you for a long time. Does that come across on your side, Jen?
Oh, 100%, absolutely. Yeah, it's you can tell if it's a well-oiled machine and people have worked with each other. They don't even have to say anything. They kind of know and expect, and versus, you know, bumpiness or just not communicating well, and it trickles down. It's an energy, it's a flow. 100%, you can absolutely tell when people have a crew that they've worked with before and they trust, and they you know, it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
And just a quick public service announcement, something Art told me a decade ago that we've made a part of our practice is to pay your crews not when you get paid for a job, not even 2 weeks late. You pay on Friday or Thursday or whatever day you process payroll. Like you pay your crews. That was advice that Art you gave me a long time ago. Like you process this job's payroll out of the last job that you already got paid for, and that's how. And it's important that you take care of your crews. And I've been noticing too in the conversation about the communication conversation. We have a shoot that we're organizing for when it's okay to do this shoot, and calling up our crews and asking if someone's available for a shoot required so much more communication about what it was, how it was going to be approached, what the safety protocols were going to be, what the layout of the day was, what the hours of the day was, you know, all of these things that normally you just say, hey, you're available on this date, here's the rate, here's it's inside or it's outside. And all of a sudden it was like, no, I think that communication is really trickling all the way down, and people want to have full transparency and they want to be communicated with and understand what they're walking into. So I want to open it up to questions in the Q&A. If people start putting them in there, I'll try to pull some out. I have a couple more that I pulled out off of the all of these the registration emails, but I'll also be looking at the chat window right here. One conversation that's been happening in the chat window a little bit, I'm just curious what your hot take is, Jen, is about cold calls. Like, has one ever struck you and got you at a good time and it was a good way for a photographer to introduce themselves, or are those generally off-putting and feel like an interruption and don't feel like welcome communication?
Like an actual phone call?
Yeah, like a phone call.
No.
Yeah, great.
Don't do them at all.
Yeah.
It's not a good idea. It's just, especially in this day and age, it's just not necessary. Yeah. I mean, granted now, I mean, we're not in the office, we're at home now, and, you know, dynamic has changed a bit, but yeah, I don't know. It's definitely shifted. I would not recommend cold calls at all.
Is there a novel way that people have reached out in this new time? Is there a way that you've seen that people are sort of successfully getting in front of our producers or you know, potentially people they want to work with? You know, we've heard about Zoom portfolio reviews. We've heard about you know, pithy subject lines. We've heard about there's been a few different sort of tactics that have floated around. Have you seen anything?
I mean, I think these forums are interesting, like where, you know, there's a group discussion during lunch or at some point where you can kind of be exposed to different types of people or hear different things. That's kind of a new novel thing, which has been fun to participate in or pop in and out of throughout the day as they kind of come up, because you kind of get nuggets of information from each one depending on who's part of the group and who they're talking to. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, I think we're all kind of really zoomed out at the end of the day, and we're just so sick of being in front of a screen for everything. I saw, you know, that guy who does the cardboard. His last one was not all calls need to be video. Like, so I think.
Oh my God, yes, yeah. We're dealing with a client right now, and they're insisting on Zoom calls as if this is the new normal.
I know.
And I literally wrote an email that said, you know, we could just have a regular old conference call. And that was like a revelation.
Yeah,
I did.
It's shifted a lot.
I did a creative call the other day just as a conference call, and it felt so novel and weird. I was like just pacing around like I normally do and not stuck on the screen. It was great.
Yeah, it's kind of refreshing because it's like you're not always just on and but yeah, I mean, other than that, so I think we're kind of inundated with screen time, whereas before we were able to kind of get up and walk around and go to meetings and talk to people. So I feel like that's kind of, you know, at the end of the day, we just want to shut it all off. And, you know, it's like now we Zoom with our friends. So it's like, it's hard for me now to be like, to take Zooms with people I might not know as well, or to like Zoom a portfolio review or something like that, just because we're Zooming now where we didn't used to with our personal world and life. So. And
to get on Zoom calls and be disappointed with people's lighting, it's heartbreaking.
All right, Art sent out a great how to get your lighting right on Zoom email as a PSA, which we appreciated.
Yeah, I'm not going to call anybody out because I don't know any of these people, and but I'm looking at you.
It's true. It's an expectation. When we did this very first call, we got on the call and Hannah and Andrea had beautiful lighting and Joe Puyesi and I had poor lighting, and we were both like, wait a minute, what have we done wrong? we were not there on the Zoom lighting yet. So it sounds like maybe some of those Zoom reviews and ways of reaching out were maybe novel for the first month or the first 6 weeks, but some of that novelty wore off a little bit, and now it's back to sort of the cold, hard reality of having to have something interesting to say, having specific work that solves a need, being consistent about communicating it in front of clients that can hire you to do that sort of work, having timing and relevancy.
Right. Yeah. But I do think, like, to your point earlier, like, you know, now I might be able to make it to an Art of Freelance event, whereas I wasn't able to trek across town to make it. So I think, you know, people are able to kind of get together more so with people they might not have before,
Yep.
and kind of get and have be part of discussions like this that we weren't really open to before. So I think that's a really great thing to come out of this.
I totally agree that one of the most heartening things has felt like the community of creative freelancers that we do have, and the way that people really supported each other and shared information and tried to sort of lift each other up in this time. And it feels like there's more solidarity amongst not just the photographers, but you know, the agents, producers, you know, art producers, clients, everybody feels sort of in this together in a real way, which it didn't always feel like that. So that feels good. Yeah. So there's a question in here. So I think there's going to be for sure questions that are sort of the here and now. People are curious about liability and crew and talent having to sign waivers before the shoot. Do you guys want to give your hot take on what that might look like?
Yeah, it's like, it was in the New York Times on Sunday.
Thank you for having that on standby.
Oh, dude, I am never getting rid of this. Yeah, this is on my desk 24/7.
And John just put out there, the ASMP has a good page on liability, and agree, they've been a great resource. And I printed out their liability releases. I don't feel like those are going to shield you from liability in the event that you actually do something dumb and put people at risk. But I do think that it continues to communicate what the expectations are for us and our crews and our clients, and you know, continues to lay that out there. It sort of makes clear what risks we're asking people to take, what risks people are taking on, what we're planning to do to prevent risks from being too risky, to add to the safety. So I think that any clarity we can provide in our communication about what that looks like will be good. Someone asked Art if you could share the paper with the 4 pillars again. He's ready. It was right there. Take a screenshot.
Those are great pillars, by the way. I really appreciate that.
You can, Art, you have to say something so that your screen goes big. Make some, there we go.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Production, marketing, finance, and archive.
Yeah. And I think when you first showed me that 10 years ago, I was like, archive, man, I don't want to finance. Like, I'll work on my productions and my marketing. And I do think that there are stages to, you know, it's hard to focus on everything all at once, although you probably should. But the more that I took the time to focus on the finance and the archive, they really did end up being huge resources, especially in the past 2 months, to have those, that foundation put in place.
Yeah, and you know, now more than ever, you know, I'm relying on what are essentially the 3 pillars of my organization, which are my calendar, which has nothing on it, and my database, which is customized FileMaker Pro off the shelf, and DF Studio. And I am not here to shill for anybody, but I want to go back to this idea of, you know, these micro goals of, you know, dealing with building the support underneath each of our businesses. And this is going to be a really awful, terrible, sad example. But the last major upgrade to our database, and it's not even an upgrade, it was just an addition, was making a space on the database for essentially a resume, a LinkedIn, a list of where this person had been. You know, like, oh, they worked here and they worked here and they worked here and they worked here. And the reason that that's kind of sadly relevant right now, and yes, I would be happy to screen share it. I don't know if I'm allowed to. But the reason that that's important is that yesterday, CBS laid off 400 people, which is astounding, and 40 of them in the marketing division alone. So first and foremost, there's the point of, you know, my knowing that and my having my ear to the ground and looking at Deadline and Variety and the Hollywood Reporter. And then secondly, like, okay, wow, I've got to go into my database and make sure I know who it is that is still kind of, you know, leading marketing at CBS. So, you know, a deep dive into your database, cleaning up your database is huge.
Making a database, making a spreadsheet, starting with just like the list of going through your email. Who, you know, I feel like people don't even necessarily have a spreadsheet that has the people that they're trying to be consistent and reach out to, putting any kind of processes in place that you can go back to that are replicable over that time feels like it would be a win right now. I'm curious, Jen, I guess you probably both have something to say about this, like what you're talking about, Art, with that research and targeting with your outreach and knowing who people are and where they are. Jen, it must be so nice when people reach out to you and it's relevant and it's targeted and they know what, you know, even what accounts you work on and that you do work on automotive projects and they reach out to you with relevant stuff. And I've heard our producers say the worst is that I work on this automotive account and people keep sending me food photography, and it's just like, how, you know, how can people get more relevant in their outreach, and how can they know sort of what you're working on and how to be relevant in their outreach?
Yeah, it's the personalization key is so important. I think that was one thing, having been an art producer and when I became a rep for a couple of years. I mean, I knew how many emails I got all the time and how, you know, so many of them can just, you know, go in one ear and out the other. And so it was really important to me to kind of build some sort of personal relationship with each person, or try to identify them with them in some way, or you know, try to be like, oh, it was so nice meeting you last year, and kind of like something where I could remind them of who I was, and how I knew them, or if we knew someone in common, or, you know, you know, just something to be more personable, so it just doesn't seem like a mass email. I mean, there's a time and place for mass emails, but I think once you can become more personable with each person, and I mean, that's an amazing thing to do, is to kind of build you know, a database of who, because we, you know, we do move around a lot, and it's important, I think, to know where people have been, if you can kind of keep up with them and follow them along, because you never know, someone, you know, will move someplace where, you know, they might be more inclined to hire you now, where they necessarily didn't have the types of clients before where they could hire you. So I think that's so smart, and it really sets you apart from all of the rest when you can be more personable, and make more of a personal connection. It really is huge.
Yeah, that's great. I guess I was curious. So someone asked in the chat right here, how do you do this with new people you've never met? And I was just sort of thinking to myself that you said personal relationships. And I guess it's a good question, but it's sort of like a very broad question. How do you build a personal relationship with somebody? Like, there's 100 paths to get there. I think I was reflecting also on the fact that, like, you don't need, I think people forget that you don't need 100 clients necessarily to make a great year in photography. You know, 5 clients that are really consistent and regular and that trust you and that you can grow with. I mean, we've all seen people's careers be built on one great client that they work with consistently and build with. And I think people forget that it doesn't need to be, you have to talk to 1,000 people in order to find those 5 great clients. Sometimes just a few clients can really push your career forward in a real way.
And that's also, it's also structural. It's also start now, you know, start anytime. You know, I see, you know, Barb Griffin on this call. I've known Barb for years. And, you know, we weren't friends 20 years ago, but we are now, you know, just, you know, over time. And, you know, I know that, you know, building relationships is absolutely vital. And to be honest, I came to that party, you know, really late, because I thought you just went to work and did the shoot and went home. You know, it just didn't occur to me that, that personal relationships were that vital. And I recently was asked by, you know, I was mentoring a university student, and she said, you know, I don't want to trade on my personal relationships. And I said, absolutely not. That's not what this is about. But there's also no question that, you know, being connected to people in the right way is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's got to start somewhere.
I'll go for it, Jen.
I was going to say, it's got to start somewhere. And if, you know, you don't have anything work-wise to tie you together with that person, like do your homework, and maybe they're from the same part of the country you came from, or maybe, you know, like something that you can kind of relate to, where it shows that you've gone above and beyond and maybe done your homework about that person, because you do want to get to know them in a you know, in a more personal way.
There's a great comment in the chat that was sort of doing that targeted research also, and commenting on something that they've created, looking at their LinkedIn, seeing what work they've created, what's relevant, going back through ComArts and seeing what they've had published, and saying, I love that campaign, or something, you know, here's something similar that I did, or a reason why you're reaching out that makes it more relevant. Like stalking without being too creepy about it, right? We can all,
right, exactly.
the non-creepy kind of stalking.
Yeah, exactly.
Professional stalking.
Yeah, and Matthew, I saw a question in the chat about showing my database, and I actually found a card that doesn't have any personal information on it.
Oh, great.
Just so people could see what my cards look like.
This is FileMaker Pro.
This is the people card in FileMaker Pro, yeah. And there it is. So what we added was that news and contact column over on the far right. And it just allows me to understand, oh, this is where this person has been.
Yeah.
And that has become huge for us, because you might encounter, like, you're going to, over the course of your career, you're going to come in contact with thousands of people. And this is months old. Like, I can't believe I didn't figure this out sooner. Kind of bums me out.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. You know, and we use something called Daylight, and it's another one of these sort of CRMs. They call them CRMs, I think, these customer relationship managers. And it's amazing that you sort of basically designed your own by, you know, hacking into FileMaker Pro. And I know it's a good option for people, and there's off the shelf ones too, but it's the process of keeping up with that, and, you know, not using it in a way that feels creepy, using it in a way that feels like you're able to provide more value, because now you're being targeted, and now you've done your research, and now you know who they are and where they are and what they're working on, and that there's some people that maybe you don't reach out to tomorrow because you're not relevant for them, and you'll save their inbox for someone that is more relevant. You'll spend your time reaching out to someone that you are more relevant for. Seems like valuable, and not just you know, a marketing tool.
And the database obviously is only as strong as you're inputting information. And one of the things that this shutdown is the nice term, has given us is the time to do it. That's the micro goal, you know, updating that's one of the micro goals, just updating the database.
This is great. This has been great advice. I hope that this has been helpful for people, and I hope that people have been along for the ride of not doing the right now, but doing the broad view. And I hope that this was helpful for folks. It's 2:06, so we've already gone over our time a little bit. So I just wanted to say thank you to Art and Jen again. for giving us this time and being so thoughtful and sharing this kind of experience with people. And I hope that this was helpful. And I hope that we can continue as a community to support each other and provide this kind of community with each other. Yeah. Any last thoughts?
From us or the general public?
I think from you guys. Can you hold up the New York Times headline again?
I absolutely will. I got a whole bunch of stuff here I can hold up, but let's go for the New York Times.
Well, what we do know is that's great. And Art, if the photography thing doesn't work out, I feel like there's like a puppet show in the future right here at your desk with all the different props and pictures and
oh my God,
signs.
absolutely. I don't know, how many people are aware, but California Chicken Cafe is open and they are doing an online discount.
If we could cut those chickens out and put them on little sticks, and then they could kind of pop through here.
I will go through the desk like a crazy person. My last thought, honestly, is that to get through this thing, we all have to have incredible amounts of patience and faith, and just really understand that we are all in the same boat. There aren't any answers out there. We're all waiting for the governor or the mayor and the governor to tell us what we are allowed to do. We have to be innovative. We have to be open to all kinds of new possibilities, and really dig deep into our reservoirs of patience. I'm looking around the office right now for more stuff to organize, because literally that's what I think I'm going to clean out my email today.
That's ambitious. No, that's great advice and a great way to approach it. And we don't know, and the patience is good. The best advice I've gotten so far in the past 2 months was like, don't forget that you're trying to do this for another 20 or 30 years. So stretch that horizon out, and all of a sudden things get a little bit less anxiety. Got to cross this raging river and get to the other side. But stretching that out's helped me a lot. Jen, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of, take it day by day, control the controllables, get those little micro goals and those micro wins that kind of you can build upon, and just use this time as a foundation building opportunity. And yeah, I give you all so much credit, and thank you all for constantly creating and constantly trying to figure this out and solve this new, this new atmosphere that we're going through, because we will be leaning on all of you so much to kind of help us navigate it with our clients. So I think it's great that we're all able to kind of come together in this type of forum, and I hope that continues. And I think it's great that we're all able to kind of work together and help one another. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again. We really appreciate your time today, your energy, your expertise, your thoughts. Thanks everyone for showing up for this call. I hope that was helpful. We appreciate all of you guys for being part of this community and supporting each other. Corey Hackbarth, your hair is looking just outstanding. No, it's been really great. So I guess that's a wrap on this one, and we'll hope to do this again. And hopefully you guys can join us June 11th and 12th for the showcases. I think they're going to be really great. You'll get an email about it. And I hope you can join us then. So that's it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate
Matthew, is this the part where people who are too afraid to ask the question during the panel walk up after the end of the panel and ask you the question one-on-one?
Yeah, we do the beer. We get a beer now, and then we all hang out. And then
I'm just gonna hang.
Them mute themselves. And we actually can leave this room open, and people can unmute themselves. And you're welcome to sort of use this as a community space and see what happens. I give no. I take no credit or responsibility for for what happens from this point on. But
wow, that's terrifying.
Zoom does not,
Just got type
not
55.
automatically kick it out.
I do have a salad to eat. I mean,
Art's willing to sit here for lunch and just hang out, guys. So I haven't gone anywhere yet. Jen, we know that you've got another thing, so we don't want to hold you if you need to get back to your actual work.
Oh, it's all good. I enjoyed
All
it.
right. Cool. Well, thanks again for being here. Does anyone have a question they want to ask off mute? I think you can unmute yourself, right?
I want to ask about archive. I think there's someone else asking too. Just
Great.
curious if there's anything, Art. Love your energy, by the way. Just anything you felt people often neglect that are super important to do archive.
yeah, I think it's really important to look at your archive and ask yourself, how might I need to search my archive? How am I, you know, if a client calls and says, do you have any pictures of men in kitchens with dogs? You've got to be able to go, okay, wait, men, kitchen, dogs. So I personally don't have any pictures of men in kitchen with dogs, but by a show of hands, yeah.
I do.
See?
Yeah, I've got,
Like, there's
got
at
those.
least 80 people on this call do have that, and now Jen knows. So you've got to figure out a way to make your database work for you. And I'm not going to use the M word, metadata, but there's got to be a way for you to make your image archive searchable, so that you know what's there. And if you don't know what's there, somebody can look for you. And honestly, we didn't come to the metadata party until about 2 years ago. I see Samantha nodding her head because she was instrumental in, she was our intern for probably the best 4 months of my career. And we did it ourselves, and we did it through FileMaker. We didn't do it on the imagery. And yes, I'd be happy to show that to you. I'm so glad you asked. Let's see if I go over here and I find a shoot. Let's see. All right, let's just go here, and we'll go here, and there you go. Okay, we're gonna share. Okay, no screen grabs, just kidding. You can screen grab. Okay, so what we figured out was we needed to basically break up every shoot into 6 kind of big picture categories. What type of shoot was it? What kind of studio or backdrop? These were all based on the questions we were getting asked. Okay, so what type of shoot was it? Oh, drop down. Do you have any dark, dramatic, sexy? Do you have any shoots of people with their stuff? And this is editable. Studio backdrop. We need to see men in kitchens with their dogs on a metallic backdrop. So there's metallic. We need to see artificial daylight. We want to see on-camera flash. We're just making this up. There are no rules here. And here comes the guys in the kitchen with their dogs. Do you have any stuff shot in an elevator, at a library, in a swimming pool, recording studio, sound check, and then at home, there it is, kitchen.
Wait, Art, are you sharing a second screen? I'm only seeing the Catherine O'Hara by drone page. There might be a second window that popped up on FileMaker Pro that's not being shared. Are other people seeing something I'm not seeing?
As I click these drop-down menus, are you not seeing the drop-down menus?
No, I'm not. And I think it may be because Zoom sees things as different windows sometimes. So you might need to share your whole desktop or.
Well, let's not be crazy. The point, you know what? It says my screen sharing is paused.
We're viewing it. Here, I'll stop it and maybe try it one more time and see if that does something different.
Well, the drill down doesn't really matter. What matters is that I've got these 6 categories, and then within each of these 6 categories, I've got a drop-down menu.
Right.
And this just worked for us.
Yep.
You know, I'm not saying this is going to work for everybody, but there was no way we were going to go back into our database and tag
Metadata
every
everything
single
that was
file.
already in there, right?
Yeah.
And you use Digital Fusion's sort of archiving services, right, for your archive, and that's a robust tool. If it's helpful for anyone, I use Google Drive, and it's actually pretty good. I use Photo Mechanic in Google Drive. I break mine up so that I do a really small edit, 50 images from each shoot, and then a really big edit, 500 images from each shoot. So when I'm thinking about what for a treatment, a director's treatment on this next job, I'll go through and look at the relevant jobs that I've done and just look at the 50 images edits really quick, and then say, oh, that job would be great to mine for more. That guy, that wasn't the right man in the kitchen on this one, so I'll go back to the 500 and get deeper into it. But that's all in the cloud on Google Drive, and I can access it from my laptop wherever I am, as long as I'm on Wi-Fi. Actually, it's hard downloaded with a program called Google Sync or whatever it is. So it's another tool right there. But just putting something into place sooner rather than later. It only gets harder the longer you wait, right? And the longer you wait to start doing it.
Right. When are you going to clean out your garage?
Yeah, better to do it when there's less stuff.
And I will say, like, we've had a number of stock searches more than normal recently, obviously. And, we've gone into personal archives of photographers or, something like Commute or something like that, where it's a group and we can kind of put one request in and get a lot of stuff back. And timing is important. Like, if you don't get back to people the next day, they've already moved on and they've already looked at what came through that day, and then they've made their choices and they moved on. So you can't really, it's got to be something that's easily accessible and quick to kind of pull up and provide. So yeah.
Jen is absolutely right. And all of this organization and infrastructure is really, it's in service to my career, but it's also really in the service of the clients, because I want to be able to find an answer for Jen or Barb within minutes. And if you saw my post last night, I was able to go into FileMaker, find that job, and find who was on that crew that day. And I look back at that job in FileMaker and I go, it's missing so much information. It drives me crazy. I'm not going to be a crazy person and go back, because I know I could walk into the garage right now and pull that job file and find that other information. So being able, especially now, regardless of the global situation, to be able to find information really quickly for clients, to find imagery really quickly is huge. Huge, huge, huge.
Yeah.
One of the first things I did after the shutdown was to go back through, find all the images that were model release, that were licensable, that I could actually show to clients, and put a section on my website that was licensable imagery, and then make PDFs that go along with that. And then, put together an e-blast that said, here's some model release licensable imagery to send out. And it was only by nature of having done that organization and having the model releases on file and knowing which stuff was released for commercial work and what wasn't, to be able to offer that quickly. And that actually was a bit of a lifeline there in the first weeks of the pandemic. So and it's a big pain, and it's one of those things too that it's like, it's not the reason why any of us get into photography is because we love metadata, or maybe it is, I don't know, but like for me, it wasn't the reason that I got into photography. It was not because of spreadsheets or databases or metadata or organization, but if it's the thing, exactly to your point, or if it serves the journey and the career and getting to do this for a living, then so be it. If that's what it takes to sort of to navigate this, and not just this pandemic, but this whole long career, hopefully, in doing this, then that's what it takes, and it's energy well spent.
Yeah, I'm good for another 5 minutes, and then I have to wolf down a salad before my next Zoom call.
So any last questions that anyone wants to throw at these guys?
It's a war of attrition, honestly.
You can unmute yourself and just ask also.
I have a question for Art. So you usually do very big productions, as I've seen your behind the scenes of all your lighting and how you go about doing it, but I've also seen that you do very small, more intimate shoots. Are you pivoting to do more of those like low key shoots? Or are you kind of like hoping that you're kind of like waiting out for the bigger things?
Yes, in the recent past, they were big productions, but there were always small editorial shoots where the budgets just didn't, allow for bells and whistles and ribbons and balloons. So the shoots that I've been asked to do over the last 11 weeks have been small, agile shoots. And the shoots I'm hearing about happening are requiring either for legal reasons or health reasons or both, that they are small. And I think one of the pivots that, Jen is, thinking about is, well, we may have to do the big shoots small.
Yeah.
And so, we have always scaled up and scaled down and worn a bunch of different hats. And that's what's coming down the pike is, doing as we were before, doing the same or more or a little bit less if we can push our clients in a little bit less direction.
Evan.
With
Hey.
With smaller crew and smaller budgets and limited time. So I love the little scrappy, 1 man, 2 man, 3, one person, 2 person, 3 person shoot. And I know how to do shoots with 20, 30, 40, 50 people on set. Again, it's a muscle to flex, it's a skill set, it's
Another tool in your tool belt.
I have a question relating to that, smaller crews, smaller sets, and of course, clients with not as big of budgets and, making safety a priority now as more than before. How do you talk to the client about, having to shoot less images per day when they're not even, some clients don't even know how much attention we're paying to safety now, and you go to them and say, we want to do 6 shots a day instead of 12 or whatever you want to cut in half, and then also putting more money into like a safety coordinator or whatever. Like how do you talk to the clients? Have you run into any of that yet? Or I'm assuming you haven't, but
absolutely yes, I have. And it's this discussion with a different set of people. All of us are in the same boat. Jen and her entire company is in that boat. Jen's entire industry is in that boat. Our entire industry is in that boat. Everybody's in the same boat. And that's a huge kind of relief once you kind of wrap your head around it. So then, we are having Zoom calls or conference calls and we're saying, okay, here are our considerations. I was talking to one of my very, very, very close friends this morning who is an interior photographer and a still life photographer and a food photographer, just incredibly talented. And fortunately for her, interiors don't need huge crews. She's starting to go back to work, but she's got a food client that's coming up and they want to do more shots than they did for the last shoot, and they want to do it with less budget. And she's having to sit down with them and say, it's going to go a lot slower. That's just the reality of working under these new conditions. So you're going to have to find a vocabulary and a methodology to describing what it's going to take. And I've always said, we are in the education business, and Jen said today, she relies on us to explain to her how we think we're going to get this stuff done. So you're just going to have to find a way to explain it.
Right. And then it's our job to then educate the client. And I think most clients are definitely erring on safety right now, like because they don't want to risk anything. And so, you know, they might not like it that things are costing more money, but I think right now, I think they're willing to, if they're educated the right way and it's explained in the right way, they're willing to kind of go with that because they would, you know, much rather be safe than sorry.
Yeah, I would only add on top that I think it's actually wanted and asked for, and I think that people aren't being resistant. You know, I had a job that got put on pause when all the shutdown happened, and we looked at the job and we said, you know, this is actually a decent candidate for a contactless small crew shoot when it comes back. And it was by reaching back out and saying, I want to have a conversation about the safety and about the crew size and about what the shot list can look like and change, and about how we can think about casting, you know, real families, real couples, whatever, that all of a sudden the shoot became alive again, and that we were able to actually give the agency something that they could go back to the client with and start that conversation again. And now it's, you know, it's not like awarded and moving forward until we actually have film permits that are allowed, but it rekindled the conversation and people were appreciative of the, you know, reaching out and offering that and bringing that conversation up. So I think there'll be some resistance, but I also think that you have to be willing to, you know, it's a great way to put it, form that vocabulary and have those conversations and arm, you know, your clients with information and problem solving and all that. We got to let these guys eat their salads. Thank you again to everyone for being here. Hopefully we'll do it again. That's it. A lot of love.
Thanks for
Everybody.
organizing.
Matthew, thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you both. We appreciate everybody.
Bye.